a notification illuminated Alisa's phone screen as she was extinguishing the candles on her birthday cake. Sounds of celebration filled the Azure Spire restaurant, with her friends raising their glasses to acknowledge another year of her life. However, the moment Mark's name appeared, her perception of the surroundings altered. Alisa, at 39, had just received what could be described as an exceedingly callous message. The message conveyed that Mark wished to be direct, stating he had found someone he considered superior, younger, more attractive, and an improvement. He informed her that he had transferred their shared funds into his personal account, justifying it by claiming he had earned most of it. He concluded by wishing her a happy birthday and expressing no hard feelings. A physical sensation occurred in her throat. The words on the screen were starkly visible, indicating a significant breach of trust. She did not react externally. There were no trembling hands, no audible gasp, and no tears forming. If anyone at the table observed a change, it might have been a subtle shift in her posture to a more upright position, or that her smile became more defined rather than gentle. She typed back a single word, "Congrats." Her response contained no indication of anger or desperation, just a simple, subdued acknowledgement. Mark, in his pronounced self-assuredness, did not realize, nor had he ever considered, that Alisa had been observant for several months. Mark had consistently displayed an arrogant demeanor. Initially, this was perceived as part of his appeal. The confidence, the articulate speech, and his ability to present any idea as his own, even when it was not. Subsequently, circumstances began to shift. There were unexpected late nights attributed to work at Innovatech Solutions, even though his role did not necessitate overtime. His phone was consistently placed face down. He would exhibit dismissive reactions when Alisa mentioned future plans, implying she was naive to believe they had a shared future. The financial arrangements also changed. Initially, these were minor discrepancies. His electronic payments became delayed, and he began to express concerns over shared expenses, whereas previously he had covered dinner costs without a second thought. A more significant indicator occurred the previous month, when he proposed moving their joint savings into an account solely under his name. He had asserted it was simply for ease, accompanied by a dismissive gesture, claiming he was more adept with finances and would ensure their financial security. Alisa had smiled, nodded, and allowed him to believe he had persuaded her. That same afternoon, she visited her financial institution and opened a new account. She did not withdraw the entirety of their joint savings, as that would have been too conspicuous. Instead, she systematically withdrew sufficient amounts over time that he would not detect. She transferred her portion into the new account, leaving an adequate sum to maintain appearances. Now, on her birthday, she understood precisely what had transpired. Mark believed he had achieved a victory. He thought he had appropriated everything, leaving her with nothing. However, he was about to discover the extent of his miscalculation. An hour following his text message, her phone vibrated again. This time, the notification was from a mutual acquaintance. The friend communicated, with some difficulty, that Mark had publicly announced his new relationship on Instagram. He had posted a caption indicating a significant improvement in his life, referencing out with the old, in with the new. The friend expressed strong disapproval of Mark's actions on Alisa's behalf. Alisa accessed the provided link. Indeed, Mark was depicted posing in an opulent hotel suite, his arm around a woman who appeared to be no older than 22. The woman possessed long legs, perfect hair, and a type of natural beauty that attracted attention. This was Clara, the same individual Mark had previously described to Elisa as merely a friend, someone he had asserted was irritating and immature. Yet there she was, positioned closely to him as if she were a newly acquired trophy. The comments accompanying the post were unsparing, with users congratulating Mark on what they termed a big upgrade, and an upgrade from economy to first class, while expressing mock sympathy for his former partner, assuming she was distressed. They were incorrect in their assumptions. Elisa was not experiencing distress. She was in a state of preparedness. Mark believed he had outmaneuvered her. He assumed she would react as other women in his past had, by becoming distraught, seeking closure, or descending into heartbreak. However, men with arrogant tendencies often underestimate the women they mistreat. He had forgotten that the lease for their apartment was in Elisa's name. He had overlooked the fact that he had been using her credit card for the preceding 6 months. He had failed to remember that Elisa was the one who had built their savings, while his contributions had been primarily verbal rather than financial. She looked at her phone, at the text messages, the photographs, and the comments intended to cause her humiliation, and she smiled. Mark had initiated the sequence of events, but Elisa was poised to make the final move. Mark was convinced he had already succeeded. He believed he had secured the money, the power, and the advantage. In reality, he had inadvertently positioned himself for a downfall so significant that even he would not anticipate its arrival. The first consequential action was imminent. Upon returning home, the first action Elisa took was to change the locks on her apartment. Mark had never arranged for his name to be included on the lease. It had always been her apartment, her responsibility, with her name on every official document. He had previously remarked when they moved in that she was much better at handling such paperwork. This prior indifference would now have consequences for him. The landlord raised no objections when Elisa called to request the lock change, confirming that she was the sole individual listed on the lease agreement. The landlord informed Elisa that as the sole leaseholder, she could do whatever she wished. By midnight, Mark no longer had a home to return to. At 1 a.m., Elisa received the first indication that reality was dawning on Mark. A single text message from him. He stated it was super weird, but he thought his key was not working and asked if she could let him in. Elisa let the message remain read but unanswered. 15 minutes later, another message arrived. He asked Elisa what was happening and mentioned he needed to retrieve some of his belongings. She still offered no response. This was because Mark's possessions, the suits, the watches, the expensive sneakers he had purchased but never maintained, everything he had left behind, was already packed into trash bags and placed in the hallway outside the apartment. When he attempted to re-enter his former life, he would discover himself standing outside a locked door, looking at his belongings like an outsider on the curb. This, however, was merely the start. At 8 a.m. the following morning, Elisa contacted their bank. She stated she needed to report fraudulent activity on their joint account. The customer service representative's voice was polite yet firm, inquiring about the nature of the fraudulent activity. Elisa took a deep breath, prepared to utter the words that would overturn Mark's world. She explained that money had been withdrawn without her permission, and that she possessed text message proof indicating her ex-partner had maliciously taken the funds. After a brief pause, the representative asked if Elisa could forward those messages to their fraud department. Elisa confirmed she would be happy to do so and sent the proof within minutes. By 9:30 a.m., Mark's personal bank account, the one into which he had so proudly transferred all their shared money, was frozen pending an investigation. The subsequent text message from Mark arrived as expected. He demanded to know what Elisa had done, stating his bank account was locked and he could not access anything. Elisa sipped her morning coffee before replying, suggesting it was peculiar and that perhaps he should call his bank. He did call, and Elisa imagined what that call must have been like. She pictured the moment the bank representative explained that his account was frozen due to a fraud complaint, that he would not have access to a single cent until the matter was resolved, and that the funds he had taken were not as securely placed as he had believed. Elisa envisioned the slow realization dawning on him, that his grand upgrade was not proceeding as planned, that Clara's dreams of a luxury vacation had abruptly ended, and that Elisa was not the fool he had perceived her to be. Mark had booked a rental car for his trip with Clara, a flashy convertible, naturally. Elisa knew this because she had seen the confirmation email appear on their shared tablet weeks prior. He had used Elisa's credit card for the booking, having foolishly left her card details saved in the system, presumably thinking she would not notice. Consequently, at 10 a.m., Elisa made her second phone call of the day. She reported an unauthorized transaction on her credit card. By noon, the rental car reservation was canceled, and just like that, Mark and Clara were left without transportation for their intended journey to a better life. At precisely 12:17 p.m., Elisa's phone rang. It was Mark. She let the call go to voicemail. A minute later, another call came through, then another. By the fifth attempt, she finally answered. Mark demanded that Elisa fix the situation, stating his bank account was frozen, his rental was canceled, and his belongings were in trash bags outside the apartment. He asserted that she had made her point. Elisa smiled, twirling her coffee spoon between her fingers, and informed Mark that she had not even started. Mark was beginning to lose his composure. Elisa could discern it in his voice, observe it in his texts, and sense it in his desperation. However, she was not finished, not by a considerable margin. She believed there was little satisfaction in retribution if the person who committed the betrayal did not fully comprehend the extent of their error. Elisa intended to ensure Mark experienced the full weight of the consequences he had brought upon himself. The most satisfying aspect was that he still had no inkling of how thoroughly the trap had been laid. Mark's subsequent brilliant maneuver had been to book a high-end hotel suite for himself and Clara, 5-star luxury, ocean views, a private balcony, a fantasy trip intended as the pinnacle of his upgrade to a superior life. Unfortunately for him, he had not paid attention to the fine print. When he transferred all their shared money into his personal account, and that account was subsequently frozen due to the fraud investigation, the pending hotel charges were declined. At exactly 3 p.m., Mark and Clara arrived at the hotel, dressed for a vacation they could no longer afford. Elisa wished she could have seen Mark's face when the receptionist politely informed him that his payment had been declined, and unfortunately, they had been compelled to release his reservation. Clara must have been far from pleased because half an hour later, Elisa's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Elisa already knew who it would be. She answered, keeping her voice light as she said hello. A moment of silence followed. Then it was not Mark, but Clara. Her voice was tight with frustration. Clara began, saying Elisa's name and acknowledging that things were weird between them. But Elisa interrupted her. She asked Clara how the upgrade was treating her. After a silence, followed by a sharp intake of breath through Clara's nose, Clara stated she just needed to know if there was anything they could do to fix the situation, adding that Mark had said Elisa froze his account. Elisa laughed, questioning if Mark had indeed said that, and further inquired if he had also mentioned how he had stolen money that was not his, or how he had abandoned Elisa on her birthday in an absolutely callous manner. Clara exhaled sharply, stating she had been unaware of any of that and had merely thought. Elisa interrupted her again, suggesting Clara had perceived Mark as an innocent, misunderstood individual who needed rescuing. Elisa posited that Mark had likely told Clara she was cold, controlling, and unsupportive of his aspirations. The silence on the other end of the line confirmed Elisa's suspicions. Clara was finally comprehending that she too had been manipulated. It was, however, too late. While Mark was desperately trying to find a way to pay for a hotel he could no longer afford, the internet was thoroughly enjoying this situation. Mark, being the overconfident and social media-obsessed individual he was, had broadcast his new life prematurely, and people had taken notice. Comments began to appear. "Damn bro, flex too early, LMAO. Imagine leaving your girl for an upgrade just to go broke in 24 hours. And nah, karma came with express delivery on this one." Even individuals who did not know Elisa personally were criticizing him severely. Then the moment Elisa had been anticipating occurred. Mark's boss saw the posts. At 4:45 p.m., Elisa's phone vibrated again. It was Mark. She answered this time, solely to hear him struggle. He began immediately, his voice low and controlled, as if attempting to sound calm but failing. Elisa smiled. She asked him what he wanted her to stop. Mark asserted that she knew exactly what. He explained that his boss had called him that day. Elisa feigned surprise and inquired as to why his boss would do that. Mark let out a bitter laugh, explaining that apparently some people at Innovatech Solutions had seen his Instagram post, and now Human Resources was involved. His company had a strict non-fraternization policy, and Mark had been involved with a subordinate. Clara was not just some random woman. She was a junior staff member at his firm Innovatech Solutions, and now corporate had questions. Mark believed he was calling to intimidate Elisa into ceasing her actions. He still did not grasp the full extent of his losses. Elisa decided to articulate it for him. She stated, "Mark, let's get something straight. I didn't do anything to you. You did this to yourself. You stole our money. You played yourself. You lost control the moment you underestimated me." His breathing became sharper. He began to swear, but Elisa interrupted, telling him not to swear to God, but to himself, that next time he would not be so foolish. She then excused herself, stating she had plans, and wished him enjoyment of his better life, if he could still afford it. With that, she hung up. His calls continued to come, but she never answered. Mark was losing control. Everything he had so confidently appropriated was slipping through his fingers like sand. No money, no hotel, no car, no apartment, and now no job security either. However, Mark was not the type to concede defeat quietly. He was the kind of individual who would set himself on fire merely to feel as though he were still in control. This meant his next action was the most foolish of all. At 9 a.m. the following morning, Elisa awoke to a knock at her door. Not a text message, not a call, but a knock. Through the peephole, she saw a uniform. An officer asked for Elisa Walker as she opened the door. She maintained a calm demeanor and confirmed her identity, asking if there was a problem. The officer explained they had received a report about stolen property. Her ex-boyfriend, Mark Carter, claimed she had unlawfully kept items belonging to him. Elisa almost laughed aloud. She inquired if he had indeed made such a claim. The officer specified that Mark had mentioned some designer watches, a laptop, and a few suits. Elisa stepped aside, gesturing to the hallway where Mark's trash-bagged belongings still sat. She stated that everything he had left behind was right there, untouched, and he was welcome to retrieve it if he came to get it himself. The officer glanced at the bags and asked if she had prevented Mark from accessing his property. Elisa replied in the negative, but confirmed she had prevented him from accessing her apartment, her money, and her life, questioning if that constituted a crime. The officer smirked, stating it was not at all a crime and sounded like a civil matter, not a criminal one. He informed her they would be closing the complaint. And just like that, Mark's pathetic attempt to intimidate her through law enforcement failed. That was strike one. 2 hours later, Elisa's phone buzzed again. It was a call from a familiar number, Clara. Elisa considered ignoring it, but overcome by curiosity, answered with a light hello. Clara's voice came through, tight with frustration. She stated she needed to know the truth and asked how much of this Elisa had planned. Elisa repeated the word plan, feigning confusion and asking what exactly Clara was accusing her of. Clara told her not to feign ignorance, explaining that Mark was broke, his job at Innovatech Solutions was on the line, his accounts were frozen, and he was now staying at her place like some homeless ex-frat boy. Clara asserted this was not just bad luck. Elisa had done something. Elisa smiled, swirling her coffee. She asked Clara if Mark had ever told her why they shared that bank account. Silence. She then asked if he had ever mentioned whose name was on the apartment lease or how he had been living off Elisa's credit cards for months. More silence. Then, softly, almost bitterly, Claire replied that no, he had said Elisa owed him that money, that Elisa was controlling, and that Elisa would never let him have any independence. Elisa let out a short laugh, remarking that he had convinced Clara that stealing from her was merely him taking back control, a classic tactic. Clara exhaled sharply, admitting she had been an idiot. Elisa did not argue, because Clara, in a way, had been. The final blow to Mark's situation came 3 days later. Innovatech Solutions officially terminated his employment. This was not solely due to the workplace relationship scandal, though that was serious enough. Human Resources had also reviewed his expense reports. It turned out Mark had been reimbursing himself for fictitious business dinners. He had even expensed hotel stays that Elisa had not yet discovered. His arrogance was not just a personal failing, it extended to his professional conduct. His downfall was not just personal, it was professional self-destruction. And now Mark was truly left with nothing. The very last time Mark ever contacted Elisa was 1 week later. His name appeared on her screen, but instead of rejecting the call, she answered. She wanted to hear what he had to say. He began, his voice hollow, stating, "Elisa, you win." Elisa said nothing, allowing his words to hang in the air between them. Mark sighed, then continued, I don't get it. You didn't even try to get back at me. You didn't scream. You didn't fight. You just let everything collapse around me." Elisa took a deep breath and finally answered, "Mark, you did all of this to yourself. I didn't have to fight you. I just had to watch you destroy yourself." Silence followed. Then quietly, he said, "I messed up, huh?" Elisa smiled and replied, "Yeah, you did." Then she hung up, blocked his number, and never looked back. Mark was gone, blocked, erased, a ghost in her past. And yet the ripples of his destruction were still spreading. Not that Elisa cared, she had already moved on. But Mark was learning the hard way that when you build your life on lies and arrogance, there is nothing left when it all crumbles. It did not take long for word to spread about Mark's downfall. His old friends turned on him faster than he could say upgrade. His coworkers at Innovatech Solutions had already seen the warning signs before he was fired. And his family, well, that is where things became particularly interesting. One afternoon, Elisa received a text message from an unexpected number. It was Mark's mother, Susan. Elisa hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. Susan's message read, "Elisa, I know you don't owe me anything, but can we talk?" Elisa stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "That depends. Are you about to blame me for your son's life falling apart?" Susan's reply came instantly. "No, I need to know the truth. He won't tell me anything, and all I hear are pieces of the story from other people." That was interesting, because if his own mother was no longer defending him, it meant Mark's charm had officially run out. Elisa agreed to meet her for coffee, not because she cared about Mark, but because she wanted to see how much damage he had done to himself. When Elisa walked into the cafe, Susan looked exhausted, as if she had aged 5 years in just a few weeks. "Thank you for meeting me," Susan said, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. I need to understand how this happened." Elisa shrugged. "Your son overplayed his hand. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he was smarter than me." Susan sighed. "He told us you were controlling, that you tried to ruin him." Elisa laughed, shaking her head. "Tell me, Susan, what does controlling mean to Mark?" "Because as far as I can tell, it means not letting him get away with everything he wants." Susan did not argue. In fact, she looked guilty. "We spoiled him," she admitted. "We always bailed him out when he screwed up. His dad and I thought we were helping, but I see now that we just enabled him to believe he'd never face real consequences." Elisa took a sip of her coffee, letting Susan's words settle. Then Susan asked the real question, "Elisa, is there any way back for him?" Elisa thought about it, then said the only thing she knew to be true. "Not until he realizes that he is the problem." And by the look on Susan's face, Elisa knew she already understood the answer. Elisa heard bits and pieces over the next few months. Mark moved back in with his parents. Apparently, they gave him conditions this time. No free money, no reckless spending, and definitely no more girlfriends using him as a stepping stone. This was ironic because Clara had ended her relationship with him a week after Elisa's last conversation with her. Apparently, being the upgrade was not as enjoyable when the money ran out. While Mark was stuck rebuilding his life from scratch, Elisa was thriving. She received a promotion, traveled, and started a business on the side. For the first time in years, she felt completely free. No more waiting for someone to mature, no more walking on eggshells, no more playing a game where the only way to win was to leave the table entirely. One day, nearly a year later, Elisa received a message request on social media. She almost ignored it, but then she saw the name, Mark. Curiosity got the better of her. She clicked. The message read, "Elisa, hey, I know it's been a long time. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I screwed up. I should have treated you better. I don't expect anything, but I wanted you to know that." Elisa stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it unanswered, understanding that some apologies arrive far too late. Mark was nothing but a distant memory now, a lesson, a cautionary tale, a reminder of everything she would never tolerate again. While he was still attempting to extricate himself from the predicament he had created, Elisa's life was only improving. The most significant aspect was that Elisa did not just survive his betrayal, she thrived because of it. A year had passed since that dreadful birthday, since the risible text message where Mark declared he was upgrading his life at Elisa's expense. Yet when one considered where they both ended up, it was clear who had truly won. This was Elisa's reality now. Her career at a prominent firm had skyrocketed. The side business she had started, a boutique consultancy, had taken off. It turned out that when one removes a financial burden from one's life, one's bank account thrives. She had found love again, a real, mature, respectful relationship with someone who did not need to diminish her to feel like a man. While Mark was reportedly stuck in his parents' basement, Elisa was exploring cities, trying new foods, and finally living for herself. She did not require revenge because her success spoke for itself. However, life has a peculiar way of resolving loose ends. It happened at a mutual friend's wedding. Elisa almost did not attend, but a feeling suggested it would be worthwhile, and she was correct. The moment she walked in, she saw him. Mark was slumped at a table in the corner, nursing a cheap beer, looking nothing like the man who once thought he was too good for her. His once carefully styled hair was unkempt. His expensive suits were now replaced by an ill-fitting dress shirt. His signature confidence was gone. Elisa almost felt a pang of sympathy for him. Almost. This feeling dissipated when their eyes met, and she saw it. Regret, the kind of regret that settles deep in one's bones when one realizes a trade of gold for tinfoil has been made. Elisa gave him a small, polite smile, then turned back to her date, the handsome, successful man sitting beside her, the one who actually respected her. She allowed Mark to watch her move on. Later that night, Mark finally gathered the nerve to approach Elisa. She saw him coming but pretended not to notice until he cleared his throat and greeted her. Elisa turned, giving him a polite, disinterested glance, and acknowledged him by name. Mark shifted awkwardly and remarked that she looked good. Elisa, with a slight smile, stated that she knew. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. He supposed she had heard about everything. His job at Innovatech Solutions, Clara, all of it. Elisa nodded affirmatively. He let out a short, bitter laugh and guessed she was pretty happy about how things had turned out. Elisa tilted her head, considering her answer, then stated that no, she did not think about him enough to be happy or unhappy about it. That was the truth. His face fell. He then said he was sorry for everything and wished he could take it back. Elisa sighed, swirling the champagne in her glass, and observed that he did not understand. Mark frowned, asking what he did not get. Elisa smiled. She informed him that she did not need his apology. She never did. The second he walked away, he had set her free. Now she gestured to the beautiful life she had built, stating she had everything she ever wanted. Her gaze flickered over his worn-down appearance, as she added that he, well, had exactly what he deserved. Mark's jaw clenched, but he had nothing left to say, because deep down, he knew she was right. As Elisa walked away, she felt lighter than she ever had before. Mark had been a part of her life once, but that is all he would ever be. A past mistake, a lesson learned. The most ironic part was that he once thought leaving her would be his greatest success, but in reality, it was hers. She had won the only battle that ever mattered, the battle to live well, love better, and never settle for less again.